looking tonight. Lord knows the miles that pass, the only one who could ever...
Welcome back to Pagitt Radio, 12:33 on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. If you're driving around the lakes with your car radio on, crank it up. That'd be fun if we could be like the Sunday afternoon thump sound around Lake Calhoun here in the Twin Cities. I want to address a topic that I think is significant to Christian spirituality, and that is why there are all these religious traditions. Why within Christianity can you drive down a street to a street corner in Minneapolis and see a Presbyterian church on one corner, a Methodist church on another corner, a Lutheran church across the street, and kitty corner from that find the Baptists? Why is it that when somebody drives to work, they might drive by 5 different churches that all go by a different brand name? Where does all that come from, and does that somehow show a strength? Does that somehow show a weakness? Here's why I think it's a strength. I'm going to make a little argument here that I think these varied traditions actually show that Christianity is open to varying types of opinions, ideas, and spiritualities. Now, within any of these systems, you're going to have more open or more closed approaches, but I think that they actually demonstrate that different traditions of people and different kinds of people want to have their spirituality of Christianity accessed through varying means. Now, most religious traditions in Christianity, most of what we call denominations or streams of Christianity, most of the brand names that you would see about on your street corners or on your street signs, most of those come originally from an ethnic orientation. So you have a certain group of people who are living in a certain country and then immigrated into other countries, and they brought their expression with them. So you'd have people traveling from Sweden, and they'd bring a particular kind of approach. You'd have people traveling from Germany into Sweden, and they would bring Lutheranism with them. So normally what you had 150 to 300 years ago were denominations that were based on ethnic backgrounds, where people came from, what language they spoke, and so on. And then you'd have a little bit of theological difference in there, but most of it really had to do with a cultural understanding. I think what's happened in our world in the last 100 years in the United States and Canada, though, is a change where it's not your ethnic background, but people connect to different traditions based on their own temperament and personality type. All right, so there's this way that you can look at your personality, one of the lenses by which you could understand yourself, called the Enneagram. That word means 9, so it's the study of the 9 types. The Enneagram, Enneagram, Enneagram. And the Enneagram is built around this notion that there are 9 types of people, each who have a root fear in their life and a root aspiration. And their temperaments tend to form in 9 different segments, 9 different clusters of these. And I think that religious traditions in the United States actually fit into these 9 types. So I think there's at least 9 different types of people in the world, and they have this base desire and this base fear, and they're going to best understand themselves and any kind of spiritual practices that they're involved in through these personality types. So I think one of the reasons that we have these varying different expressions of Christianity in our world is because we have so many different kinds of people who are planning, organizing, and implementing this spirituality. So rather than only thinking about them as theological differences, which is the funny thing, I think most religious people want it to be about, well, we believed things differently than those people believe. That kind of argument. I think it's true that different denominations, different traditions do believe different things. I just wonder, why do they believe those different things? Not just because somehow they discovered the truth, is my suggestion, but because they have a particular personality that wants to understand the world in a particular way. So these 9 different types can be connected to these 9 classic sins within Christian tradition. Some of you might know that there's this phrase called the 7 deadly sins. There's actually been a long list of them, sometimes as many as 13, and most commonly 9, and then in the United States, for whatever, we have picked up the phrase, the 7 deadly sins. But there's a set of these, each of which the way you would answer your struggle in the world, your besetting problem. See, the thing about these 9 deadly sins isn't that they're particularly bad. It's not like, boy, you get a dose of that one, and that's like catching the H1N1 virus, It's rather, there's a particular issue that 9 different personality types would be struck by that would differentiate them from the other 8. So it's which one of these struggles would sort of strike against you. So one of those is anger. One of those is vanity. One is deceit and envy, then greed and fear and gluttony and lust and indifference. Right? So there's a way of understanding the world that says different people have a certain kind of struggle that they're going to have. And somebody whose struggle is deceit might not be at all bothered by gluttony. Their thing might not be gluttony. Their thing might be deceit. Well, and those would also have a correlating basic desire that would go with them. So the basic desire of the person who has anger as their frustration is that they want goodness, integrity, and balance in their life. And the person who struggles with vanity is actually searching for unconditional love. And the one who struggles with deceit is really wants to value someone else. And the person who struggles with envy is actually really desiring authenticity. And it goes on like that. So there's this way of understanding human beings' desires in the world and their approach to spirituality being connected to those particular desires and those particular fears. Now, here's why I think this is helpful. Because if we understand people from varying traditions, not just as people with whom we disagree, but people who are pursuing a different passion or are pursuing a different worry, it can open up empathy for us to say, maybe you have a perspective that if I looked at the world through your lens, I would see it in that same way. You see, the person whose root fear, like in the Enneagram, one of these types is the Enneagram Type 1, and it's the reformer. Their basic fear is that they're corrupted and they're evil inside. Their basic desire is for integrity and balance and goodness. And their vice is anger. Well, that is a really different person than my personality type. I am an 8 in the Enneagram, and I'm a challenger. And in my world, the basic fear is a loss of control. And what I basically desire is protection and autonomy. And my prime vice would be lust. So that's a really different approach to what sounds like good news to an Enneagram 1 whose basic fear is that they're corrupt. My basic fear is to lose control. So if you can imagine, the person whose basic fear is that they're corrupted, they want something to solve their problem. So they will go to a tradition in which they would say, the church grants me some kind of way, some means by which I can deal with the corrupt, evil nature that I think is within me. Right? So they might go to a tradition where you would have confession, or where you would have taking communion as an act of forgiveness of sin, or where you would have some kind of structure that would say, we recognize that there's evil in the world, we recognize that you are corrupt, and we have a way of doing something about that. Me, on the other hand, because my basic fear is to lose control, I go into a place like that and have somebody stand there and say to me, hey, you have something wrong with you and I have the solution and I'm going to now give it to you. That doesn't sound like particularly good news to me. That makes me just kind of lose my bearings, right? Well, when the Enneagram 8, the type that I am, says, well, how would I want to organize life? Well, I would want to organize life into truth approach that's going to include as many people as possible, where we become a community in which you are protected by other members of that community, not by some outside force. Well, and it goes on and on like this. The person whose major fear in the world is that they aren't going to be able to achieve worthwhileness. When they go to a community of spirituality, they're going to want the message there to tell them that they're worthwhile, that they're meaningful, that they count in the world. Where the person who has the real fear of boredom goes there and says, I don't want someone to tell me that I'm worthwhile in the world. I want someone to open up the means by which I can experience life. And so different people will experience different spiritual traditions in ways that would say to them, that's not at all interesting to me. And here's the advice that I'd give to any burgeoning or current religious practitioner. Recognize that different people are going to experience what you say through a different lens, and it may not sound like good news. right? So when you are communicating to someone that the major story of God is that you are loved in this world, there is a personality type, the Enneagram 2, for whom unconditional love is their base desire. You can tell folks like that they are loved 100 times a week for 100 weeks, and it will never seem like too much. They will never, ever feel like too many times has it been expressed that I am loved without condition. But when you say that to the Enneagram 1 type, that you are loved, they're going to say, well, there must be something wrong with you because I am actually corrupt on the inside and I need to have that fixed in some way. Or when you say that to the peacemaker, who all they want is stability in the world and not to hear a message of unconditional love, but they want things to not be in conflict, they will find themselves quite at odds with the notion that there is a loving world that exists because peace doesn't seem to be at hand. So there's these different traditions that fit different personality types in particular ways. Where it gets really interesting is that people tend to pick life partners who have a little difference from them in their core desires and their core fears. So two people will decide to spend their lives together who see in one another something different from themselves that really feels good to them, that really feels right to them. And then those two people try to find a spiritual community together, or they try to read a book, or they try to listen to these ideas, or they try to engage in this radio show, or they try to organize their lives according to a particular pattern, and it works great for one of them and not so well for the other. And too often within Christian tradition, the message has been, well, that's because you're not faithful enough, that's because you're not interested enough, that's because you don't try hard enough. And I think more of it has to do with it doesn't communicate a message that taps into your core fear of the world and your core desire for how the world would be. Well, now, of course, that's the way that someone with my personality type likes to talk about these traditions, right? Is that you shouldn't be controlled by them. You should be able to engage with them openly and freely. But I do think there's a bit of advice here for all the different personality types and not just for the ones whom, for whom these traditions come naturally to them. So my encouragement is, if you have not been someone who has found yet a spiritual tradition that fits you, you might not even know what your personality type is. You might not be able to tap into your root fear, your root desire in comparison to somebody else's. But you know inside if it seems like it's telling truth to you or not. And the reason that it might be hard for you to find connection in some places is because you are someone for whom a different message seems to connect. Now, we live in a world in which access to different ideas is more ready than ever. So I think there's some real hope in the world that there's a possibility for you to find the kind of spirituality that connects with and works with you. Hey, we're going to be back here with the Right On. No, we're going to be back here with the Cripes, the Come On, and you got to be kidding me here after the break on Doug Pagitt Radio, broadcasting live out of the Twin Cities on AM 950 and DougPagittRadio.com.